What's up, guys? Welcome back to Bible Fun to Duns. Today we're in Joshua chapter 15. Let's get started.
All right, Joshua chapter number 15 is probably the greatest chapter you've ever read, right? It was so fun.
Read it out loud.
We just read it out loud. And so we're reading about Eshtaol and Zorah and Ashna and Zanoah and Caleb and Aksa, his daughter. Jax keeps calling her Roxanne.
No, I know.
That's not her name. It's Aksa, or maybe not even that. Okay, here's what we got to remember. On chapters like this, when we're reading our Bible, like this is not John chapter 3, where we're like, oh my goodness, John 3:16, the most important verse in the whole world. I got it. This is not that chapter, but listen. We have to remember, when we're reading our Bible, we're not reading mythology. How do we know we're not reading mythology? Because of chapters like this. I mean, watch. This is not mythology. This is the culmination of history and theology. So this is good history because it's telling us actual things that happened in historical past, but these things are happening because God is at work. So let me just put it like this. In chapter 15, this whole chapter is about the tribe of Judah getting their land. So it describes their borders in verses 1 through 12. It talks about their cities in verses 20 through 63. But what's happening here is the tribe of Judah is putting down roots in the promised land. And it becomes more and more prominent from this point on in the story. The tribe of Judah becomes more and more important. Now, let me tell you why this is important. Because if we took this moment and went all the way back to the book of Genesis chapter 49 says this, the scepter, well, who carries the scepter?
A king.
A king. It says, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh comes. Do you know what the word Shiloh means?
No.
It means peace. And the word Shiloh in the book of Genesis is capitalized. So it's not a characteristic. It's somebody being called Shiloh. It's somebody being called peace. And as a matter of fact, the New Testament tells us we have a Prince of
Peace.
Well, who is it?
Jesus.
All right. So all of this is setting up who? Jesus. Now, what's also interesting is it's giving us stepping stones to get to Jesus. Because Jesus had some famous ancestors, okay? Jesus goes in the book of Matthew and in the book of Luke, we have genealogies of Jesus. Some are going to start with Abraham and some are going to start with King who?
David.
King David. Now, go to the last verse of this chapter and it says, as for the Jebusites, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the children of Judah could not drive them out, but the Jebusites dwell with the children of Judah at Jerusalem to this day. So the Jebusites were people that continually remained like a thorn in the side of the tribe of Judah until a certain day. Now they outlived Joshua and all these people, but if you keep reading, the Jebusites are finally defeated in 2 Samuel chapter 5 by who? King David. And then who else comes from the tribe of Judah and defeats an undefeatable enemy later? Jesus defeats sin, death, hell, and the grave. Now, I want you to see a couple other details here. There's Caleb and there's his daughter. I'm going to talk about them on Sunday, so we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on Caleb and Roxanne. We're just not going to spend a whole lot of time with them. But I want you to remember this. When you're reading through this, notice the number of times you're seeing the word family and children and tribe. It's talking about family groups and family units. Now, the reason why this is important is because the Old Testament makes a lot out of children inheriting from their parents. They make this really important lesson about one generation passing down to the next generation the things that matter. So, Deuteronomy chapter 6 from the law says this. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 through 9. Read those for us.
All right. Listen, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. These words that I'm giving you today are to be in your heart. Repeat them to your children. Talk about them when you sit in your house and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand, and let them be a symbol on your forehead. Write them on doorposts of your house and on your city gates.
So we're talking about your house, your city gates. We're talking about your family. We're talking about passing things down from one generation to the next. Well, that's what's happening here. So what has been taught in the law is now what's being prescribed inside the home and inside how all of their society works. But I want you to see something else. There's a lot of detail here about specific cities. There's 29 cities in their villages, 14 cities in their villages, 16 cities, these cities with their villages, 11 more, 9 more. I mean, you just kind of keep going throughout all of this stuff. It's talking about all the cities that are existing because this is where the children of Judah would live. Now, let me tell you why it's important that we understand where they're living. Because in the book of Acts, chapter 17, listen to this, verses 26 through 27.
From one man he has made every nationality to live over the whole earth and has determined their appointed times and the boundaries of where they live. He did this so that they might seek God and perhaps they might reach out and find him, though he's not far from each one of us.
Okay, so God spends a lot of time and a lot of details in this chapter and to give us a lot of specific locations because the book of Acts is telling us he has determined times and seasons and places. Why? For our spiritual development. And he's using these things for spiritual purposes so that we would see that where the Israelites were getting land is not all they needed. Their needs were not fulfilled in getting territory. Their needs could only be supplied by God himself. This is not a book about land. This is a book about God's people figuring out the promised land is not a place. It's a closeness with their Father. When you read through this is something that Mama had to tell us as we were reading it out loud tonight. When you're struggling through some of those names, she said, we are going to let our eyes fall on every single word. Why? Because if God says this is important, when we dig down deep enough, we find significance here. All right, keep reading. We'll see you next time. We'll be in chapter 16.
Bye.